All right, if you just joined us, it's still Journalist Hangout. I still have BK O'Rai here and Asukwo James. Now, let's switch gears. Joining us for more information about this issue, talking about the Nigeria First, Special Advisor to the President on Economic Affairs in the Office of the Vice President, Tokwe Fasua. Tokwe Fasua, thank you so much for joining us, sir, on Journalist Hangout.
Thank you for inviting me. Good afternoon.
All right, let's start this conversation, with the launch of the Nigeria First initiative. Talk to me. How feasible is this?
Well, it's feasible, even if we don't achieve 100% immediately, but we can ramp up the progress and success of that program, of that law, of that resolution of the Federal Executive Council. In time. It's only fitting for two reasons. The first thing is we all know what's going on the global scene. Countries seem to be thinking more for themselves now because times are tough. And of course, every country has to think about how to weather that storm that's brewing at the global level, especially between the USA and China. At the local level, the government has embarked on some very serious reforms in the last 2 years. And now we're talking about percolating the reforms and the gains of the reforms to the very grassroots of our economy. In which case, the point is, how does that happen if we don't patronize made in Nigerian goods? It's only fitting. Indeed, there's some anecdotes as well about, even in the United States, people talk about between the Jews, the Chinese, and the blacks. That the Jews tend to keep their money within the family more than other people, and therefore they are successful. I think that African countries, especially Nigeria, are also thinking, you know what, we want to be productive. Mr. President has always said this is the focus. The focus is productivity, local productivity, industrialization, a comeback of the manufacturing industry, even our services sector, which contributes about 52% of the GDP, we can patronize ourselves. And so I was very glad to hear some of the specifics of that policy, especially the part that says, you know what, even the government itself, federal, state, local, there's a need for us to keep a list of local service providers that are trusted, to begin to populate that list. These are the people that will benefit. And I think it also dovetails to one of the key gains of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the government, and of course the reforms of recent past. The point is that macroeconomic policies have been taken at the larger level, but one thing it has done very significantly is release a lot of money to the state governments and the local governments, indeed. And of course, Mr. President is pursuing ardently, and we have seen success in that area, local government autonomy, meaning that Mr. President is interested in percolating the gains and the resources to the local governments, to the grassroots and so on. So the states, a lot of the states are getting ×3 what they used to get in terms of federal allocation. A lot of the states have been able to double, some of them have tripled their internally generated revenue IGR. And that's where the action is. Beyond the federal government, which is in charge of, for the federal government in terms of people, the federal government is in charge of about 100,000 civil servants, about 100,000 only. And of course, the public service, including police, army, and all of those, maybe another 2 million, 2.5 million people. But the majority of the people, everybody lives in a state. Everybody lives inside one local government, and that's where the action is. And so the Made in Nigeria, by Made in Nigeria policy is meant to ensure that we catalyze the economy from within organically, using our own resources to reboot our own economy. And, all that talk from IMF about 3% growth, of course, for the last 2 years, we've been outstripping, indeed, we've been outstripping their expectation. Last year, they said 3%, we got to 3.4%. Year before, they said we would not be able to escape recession. We were one of the few countries that grew their economy in 2023 because everybody was still suffering from the hangover of COVID and what have you. And of course, you can see the news that came out a couple of days back that IMF actually said that the $3.4 billion that Nigeria borrowed in 2020, we've been able to repay fully. leaving a few things around interest, maybe accrued interest and so on. So I think under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the economy is doing fantastically well. And of course, the projection by the coordinating minister of the economy is 7% growth. We're not looking at 3% and all those kind of tepid growth. Thank you.
All right, let's go back to the fallout of the economic reforms, being instituted by the Nigerian government. Now, you are the special advisor on economic affairs to the president. I mean, what kind of interventions should Nigerians expect from the federal government, that will impact the vulnerable Nigerians positively?
Well, I just mentioned two of them now, and one of them is the Buy Made in Nigeria, policy. From get-go, one of the key promises of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is, local productivity, value added to many of the crude and raw products that we ship out. If you see what has happened in the petroleum sector as a result of the stoppage of subsidy, we now are, almost a net exporter of refined products. I mean, Nigeria, through Dangote and one other refinery. So, but with what has gone on now, even the federal government is going to be a bit relieved. The talk about debts and debt hangover and debt, excess debt and all of that, that's not the issue. In fact, almost none of the states are borrowing money for, right now because of the liquidity that they have. Our Nigerian balance sheet is looking pretty good. We had a balance of payment surplus of $6.8 billion, which we hadn't had in 3 years. In fact, that number, we were in deficit for the last 3 years until 2024. And even that $6.8 billion is perhaps a 10-year high if you look back. And then we had a trade surplus of $16 billion, for the year 2024. So that's now, but I want to frame it that, what President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is interested in is the foundational structures of the economy. When you deal with if you want to build a skyscraper, if you want to build maybe a bungalow, you don't have to worry so much. If you want to build a skyscraper, then sometimes I can see that there are times when you have to dig several meters down in the ground and ensure you have put proper concrete structures, use the biggest and the best stones in the world to ensure that the skyscraper you want to build is sustainable, is strong. And I think that's what we've been able to do under the guidance and the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Yeah,
you talked about the state governors because you said the state governors are getting more funding, especially since the removal of fuel subsidy. And you also talked about the Niger State governor. But do you think they are doing enough, on agriculture, for example?
Oh, well, but it's not only their initiative. Indeed, the truth is that, of course, the Federal Ministry of Agriculture coordinates from the center, but the states are the ones that own the land. Perhaps, like they say, the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement. By now, maybe Nigeria has farmed about 35 to 40% of arable land that we could farm. That means that if you flew in a small aircraft across Nigeria, you see that a lot of the land is still fallow and it's an open system. There's a lot that we can do. So we can only encourage them to do better, but not only on agriculture. I think that the key thing which we need to really focus at this moment now is to see how this good fortune that has come over the state, according to the figures, can percolate to the common man. So first of all, let's ensure that the minimum wage law is adhered to at least as much as possible. Let's pay our people, because if anyone is still earning what they were earning 2 years ago, they are in serious financial trouble because of inflation that has happened over time. Mr. President is aware of that and concerned about the well-being of the people of this country. Remember what I said, whereas the federal government is in charge of 2.5 million, 2.6 million people directly who they pay the salary every month. But the remaining, if you like, 100 million people who are workers in this country are living in the states and the local government. That's where the impact is felt. So we must encourage the governors, the other day, even in Abuja, the FCT minister, blamed the local government chairman in Abuja for not paying, primary school teachers on time, even though he had released the money. Such things shouldn't happen. They shouldn't put a bad face and a bad hue to the efforts of Mr. President, who is giving us a very big dream and releasing so much to the people. So you can see whether, and that's where the issue of buy made in Nigeria comes from. We're saying that even local contractors should get more action, should be trusted more. We should be looking at an explosion of rural infrastructure in Nigeria. And we can even involve our youths and, in some of those activities so that this money will go around and Nigerians should be more comfortable. Almost anybody that's working now should be earning a lot more than they were earning, especially those at the base of society, of the economy, should be earning. Even artisans, of course, should be earning a lot more than they were earning 2 years ago. So we're very hopeful, and we believe that under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, this country, we're here to win. He's a winner. He's here to win. We're not here to play. So we've only just begun, and I believe that we're going to achieve great results going forward, especially as it impacts the people of this country, of Nigeria, the great people of Nigeria. Starting from now into the next year, people will see a lot of changes, and we are going to bank our gains.
Fair enough. Let's talk about foreign direct investment, FDI, in oil and gas. What steps is the federal government taking to increase foreign direct investment in that sector? ExxonMobil's $1.5 billion investment, I'm sure you agree with me, may not be enough to help Nigeria meet its target of 2 million barrels per day.
Oh, well, okay, you're talking about the petroleum sector. I saw the 1.5 billion ExxonMobil, and there's a lot that's going on in that sector in Nigeria. Luckily, we've been able to do have a lot of activities. There's also the $5 billion commitment from Shell. When I was reviewing, I found that the final investment decision, FIDs, in that sector for 2024 was about $13.5 billion, which these are inflows that will come. Of course, you remember that by walking away from subsidy, which used to eat into the sector, at some point we were paying 7 trillion naira on petroleum subsidy. We've been able to free that sector. New investors. BUA is coming up. We have modular refineries in Port Harcourt, in Owerri, in different places and in Nigeria. And we're, like I said earlier, we're actually now net exporters because we have shown capacity. And there's a lot more. Mr. President is actually a gas person. You see that he's very big on gas. He told them again in Imo State yesterday, and there's a lot of plans from Anambra to Imo, the AKK gas, Ajakuta, Abuja, Kano, Kaduna, gas pipeline is being laid. Of course, we're also laying another one to Equatorial Guinea from One, and another plan is there for us to be able to pipe into Algeria and into Europe. So these are big, big plans that Mr. President has for that sector. So there's a lot more that we will see in that sector. But when you talk about foreign direct investment, it is true that historically, most of the foreign direct investment into Nigeria have kind of been skewed towards the oil sector. But however, we're desirous of diversifying the economy into other areas, not just the foreign exchange that the government gets. But we want, and the last time I checked, the most diversified economies in the world are the economies of the United States and the economy of China. And so if you want to know how a diversified economy works, we study those two countries, and what we see is just this thing that Mr. President has actually made to happen. Make in Nigeria, buy made in Nigeria. What Donald Trump is trying to fight now is that they realize that, oh, China seems to be winning the game. And so Trump is trying to push back, So we are interested in diversifying the economy, but we're also interested, most critically, in domestic investment beyond foreign direct investment. By tidying up behind ourselves, by having an ambient country and economy, we want to be able to, get our own people, first of all, to invest and show confidence in their own economy before running around for foreign direct investment. Indeed, if we are able to tidy up after ourselves and do like what Minister of Interior is doing, coming into Nigeria, getting out of Nigeria is no longer a big bother. They are clearing all of those things and making it very modern for people to do. The reputation alone is going to bring a lot more investment, whether it was into the oil sector or he was into industry and manufacturing, or into the solid minerals. In fact, one of the game plays on hand now all over the world is what they call the rare earths, which is the deal that Donald Trump is trying to do with Ukraine. I think they were able to do, was it $500 billion worth, you know. And right now, the Chinese are the ones processing 90% of the world's rare earths. And rare earths is a very important solid mineral. They get into almost every equipment, cars, hospital equipment, your phone, your laptop, it's everywhere. And I believe that Nigeria also has this. I mean, a few of them, there's cerium, there's samarium, there's europium, there's, scandominium, all sorts of things, 17 of them. So we're interested in investment in all of those areas. But with the trajectory that Nigeria is following, the thing about some of these IMF and World Bank reports is that usually, in fact, the truth is that the two reports were positive for Nigeria. But it's possible for anybody to scour the report and look for anywhere they say, okay, however, look at one or two areas. And that's the thing that gets amplified, is that, people are going to be poorer in Nigeria in 2027. I don't believe so. I think that if, for example, from what I've said about the play going on with the states and the local government autonomy that Mr. President is driving. Right now, they are going through the issues of signatory, and all of that, confirming who's supposed to be signing checks on behalf of the local government. I think that we should be able to reduce, poverty in this country in the next 2 years by a significant proportion. And we're going to be the ones measuring it ourselves. Because now we're getting to the point where we must assert our data sovereignty so that we're not just sitting here waiting for multilateral agencies to dictate what will happen to us in our future. We are going to be in charge of our own future.
Okay. Nigeria has more than 100 abandoned oil wells. More than 100 abandoned oil wells, especially in the Niger Delta and parts of Akwa Ibom State. What is the government doing to revive these wells and boost
well, I think that one of the things that can happen is the fact that Mr. President has put some new people in NNPCL, which is hopefully going to become a PLC pretty soon. And we see the pedigree of the gentlemen and ladies that are running that organization. They are futuristic, they are private sector led, quick thinkers and all of that, So, I know that we have thousands indeed, from what I've learned. Indeed, maybe thousands of some of those abandoned wells, especially onshore, that have been left there. In fact, the truth is that when we talk about US, we talk about the shale oil. Nigeria also has shale. From many of those abandoned wells, because the idea behind shale is that when the flow it begins to ebb and begins to be slower, the technology can now take you down to crack the rocks, what they call fracking, to fracture the rocks down there and be able to release more fuel. So in terms of, we have that. And there's a company that, I work with sometime called the Green Energy. They've invested about $400 million in that sector and onshore, built a new platform, and they're hoping to be able to get some of those surrounding abandoned wells to move on. So it's typically an NNPC decision. It's an investment decision, but it's of course it looks like a low-hanging fruit to allow current players to be able to move in that direction. I just passed former Mobile now, is now called Seplat. Nigerian companies are doing a whole lot more in that sector, moving into that sector, which is also making some of the IOCs to do a rethink and say, you know what, do we really want to quit this sector? None of them is quitting, they're only going offshore. So wherever I think that we should leave that to local investment, and also to see and also continue to encourage NNPC to ensure that those abandoned wells are, gone back to and reinvested in, because Nigeria has a mission. For this year's budget, we're talking about 2.05 million barrels per day. And we've been able to do up to 1.7. But the sky is the limit. In the year 1973, we were doing 2.3 million barrels a day, 2.1 million barrels a day, 1973, 1974. Today, we have much more intelligent people. We have a need. We have every impetus for us to do a lot better than we're doing today in that sector. We've gone through a lot in terms of, people, agitations, in that area. But I believe that we can move ahead with more investment, more technology coming in. Perhaps even some of the coal mining, one in Gombe, Axis, even in Maiduguri Axis, at some point in time, I believe that they will produce as well. And we have the capacity now. We've been able to improve by 200% our local refining capacity, or even more than that. Meaning that even supply, we can't, if we produce today, there's no shortage of where to sell to. If the global markets aren't taking our production, we have local refineries to feed. And our refineries are actually creating impact not only within Africa, even in Europe. Some refineries in Europe have had to close down as a result of what we have in Nigeria here. And they are recognizing that even OPEC has actually written about that. So I think that we are facing a very bright future in that sector. Okay,
the IMF World Bank has revised economic growth projections for Nigeria and other African countries, but our level of debt remains worrisome. How do we balance this, considering the fact that the monetary side has been recording some positives around foreign reserves and net reserves, which look promising? Do you think the fiscal side is consolidating the efforts of Mr. Cardoso?
Yeah, did you mention debt? Well, first of all, if I heard you right, but the point is, first of all, we spoke about the World Bank revising downwards our growth projections, but that's theirs. Like I said earlier, we've actually bested them a couple of times. We've actually outstripped their projections. Look, we are an aspirational people. Nigerians don't think small, we think big. And, at some point nationally, this big thinking will come to fruition, because we're not interested in small growth. Our growth must outstrip the GDP growth must outstrip our population rate growth significantly. So we're talking about 7% now. We'll give it a shot and move on. You mentioned debt, if I remember, if I got you right. But, Nigeria actually doesn't have a huge debt problem. Debt to GDP right now is about 54%, which is below the 70% recommended by the World Bank, or even in ECOWAS, and even locally within Nigeria, our own policy is 60%. We're still below. However, we're talking about a GDP that hasn't been rebased in the last 12 years, which the Nigeria National Bureau for Statistics is working on rebasing right now. And if they rebase, even the real estate stock alone in Nigeria, the real estate stock alone will add significant value to our GDP. And we can't be talking about $180 billion. We probably should be talking about $400 billion. If we are back to $400 billion or thereabout, then of course, things like the debt to GDP becomes insignificant at $100 billion or $105 billion. Or in fact, the debt actually dropped to $98 billion, or $94 billion, which is less than $100 billion. If it was $100 billion on $400 billion, that's 25%. Meaning that the balance sheet is stronger than it is right now, intrinsically, pending the rebasing of the economy. So I think that part of the fiscal consolidation and fiscal position that we expect from the fiscal side is this made in Nigeria thing, because the whole idea is, look, we can't be working and throwing the money abroad. We have to look inwards and so on. People talk about government expenditure. The truth is this: government expenditure in Nigeria is not enough. It's still quite small per capita. We're not spending enough. We need to spend more, but where do we spend? That's what we're seeing. We need to spend at the local level. We need to spend at the state level. And that's one significant thing that Mr. President has been able to do by this policy. So there's fiscal discipline already going on in government. In fact, many frivolities are dropped at FEC. Yes. They don't.
So we'll come to that. Yes. That's his next question.
So that is my next question. On the cost of governance,
yes,
what is the government doing to cut costs and reduce waste? The Orosai report.
Reduce what?
Waste.
Oh, yes. But
now, the Orosai report proposed major reforms. And it's like we are not seeing the impact.
Honestly, when people say this, I'd like to know the perspective you have on where government is wasting things. Now, the Orosai reports came out in 2012. At that time, indeed, the parastatals MDAs were 521. The report was not itself, on its own, was not a perfect report. One of the things he recommended was that we should scale down the MBS and reduce the staff. I said, how can you say you reduce the staff of MBS and scale down the MBS, Bureau for Statistics, when without numbers, you can't plan. So, you know, the Office of Statistics in the UK, a 60 million population, has 3,500 staff. Nigeria MBS has about 2,500. We need to scale up because we need the numbers. We need that. So the report wasn't totally accurate. It's something that needed to be reviewed to know what are we dropping, what are we not. However, between then and now, there's been a whole lot more MDAs added. Even though a lot of them are universities and polytechnics and colleges, you know, when you do that, they are also parastatals standing on their own. But every law that goes to the National Assembly seems to have a parastatal coming out of it, you know. So we don't have to call them a waste. What we probably should be looking at is, okay, what can we consolidate? So the first thing that needs to be done is that the Oronsai report, in my own view, having worked on that report as a consultant on the other side, perhaps needs to be redone to know where do we stand. Now you may not be able to merge universities. There's a new reform going on in that area, the NEL Fund, the Nigeria Educational Loan Fund, which is transforming how we see the universities and the issues, because now we've seen a scenario where the state can pay the university, pay the fees of a student to the university and get them to repay when they start to work. So we probably don't have enough universities. If more come, oh, that's all well and good. But except we do a new report before we know what we can consolidate. I don't know about waste, because when you mention waste, it's an omnibus word that needs to be properly defined. Probably you want to define and point to me and say 1, 2, 3, 4 areas areas of waste in the economy. From where I sit, for example, in my office, I don't see waste, because I think that this regime, this administration, has been very rather frugal.
Okay. Talking about boosting manufacturing and reducing imports, what strategies is the government implementing to strengthen local manufacturing and reduce dependence on imports?
Oh yeah, of course, again, you're back to buying in Nigeria.
Yes, yes. The
whole idea of buying in Nigeria is to reduce importation. And in fact, before the government took this decision, from my own research and all I've seen a scenario where, you know, a lot of the local manufacturers have had to look for local input to those things that they used to import in the past, perhaps by necessity because of where the Naira is today. And that's part of the gains of the depreciation of the Naira. Every policy has gains and, you know, downsides sometimes. You know, so as a result of where the Naira is, a lot of the manufacturers have had to look for how to substitute some of the things that they, you know, used to import. You know, of course, the Buy Made in Nigeria policy will also encourage more of that. You know, encourage local industries, local manufacturing industries. Apart from other incentives, there's a tax law that has been well approved by the Senate as of yesterday. Plus or minus some changes that they may make. But if you look at the spirit of that tax law, it's a pro-poor, pro-people tax law, pro-industry tax law, you know, which incentivizes local production a lot more, grants a lot more tax waivers. For SMEs, for example, we are moving up the tax-free, you know, threshold from 25 million per annum to 50 million per annum. If you are turning over 50 million per annum as an SME, you don't have to pay a dime to government. Equally, if you were earning as an individual, you're earning 1 million naira and below, you don't have to pay taxes to government. So those are the kind of policies that we're seeing that can help to reposition, especially our small and medium scale enterprises, as well as even the bigger ones. They are very much encouraged. The free trade zone policy is still there for companies to come in here on a tax-free basis and be able to produce, especially for export.
Okay, all right, let's talk about the IMF repayments. But can you clarify Nigeria's repayment, you know, of the $3.6 billion IMF loan and the ongoing SDR charges? Because many people believe Nigeria is still indebted to the IMF.
Well, the IMF made a statement that was clear that Nigeria has finished paying the principal of $3.4 billion. Look, people, you know, of course, opposition parties will try and poo-poo everything, including when government gets it right. That's why we too in government, you know, were stepping out to clarify some of these issues, especially in an age where people hear only headlines and run with it. And sometimes some people can be mischievous and so on. I don't know why people will be angry or, you know, sad when Nigeria repays its debt. Very few countries in this world are able to pay that kind of amount. So when we talk about the depletion of our, I mean, look at what has happened. It's remarkable. The central bank under Mr. Cardoso, coming into office just about less than 2 years ago, has been able to clear 7 billion of forwards and you know, monies that they were obligated to pay, which had become an albatross around our neck. They've been able to clear 30 trillion naira and securitize some of it, okay, by repositioning, you know, in the balance sheet of the central bank, which even came out 2024. The balance sheet was published a few days ago. 30 trillion. You know, because Mr. Cardoso happens to be a very strict individual. He's not interested in razzmatazz. We're in a kind of Greenspan, you know, kind of era where the central bank speaks less, achieves more. 30 trillion of ways and means have been cleared. $7 billion, multiply that into the naira, of forwards have been cleared. Okay, 3.4 billion of IMF loans have been paid. Eurobond of $1.5 billion. Come on. So you know what? No, I'm not sure any government can transform a country into paradise in 2 years. Like I said earlier, what Mr. President has done and his key men, especially coordinating minister for the economy, and of course the central bank governor, what they've done. I mean, just looking at those two key principal players in the economy. I'm not talking about Ministry of Interior that has done well, fantastically, Ministry of Aviation and co. You know, so what they've done is to say, you know, let's get rid of the cobwebs. Let's know exactly where we're going. Let's know how much money we have. Let's build a new foundation for this economy that we can leverage on. And the focus right now is on how that money that has been saved structurally, how the monies that have been saved structurally can impact on the people, can get into the pockets of the people. So when we talk about SDR, what the IMF said was, you know what, Nigeria has fully paid the principal, but there's a shortfall in our special drawing rights, which is there's a certain balance we need to meet up in our special drawing right, because every country has been under a lot of stress. Okay. Let me tell you, this thing I say in just a second, even the UK, the US have not been able to fulfill their own obligation. The US spent about $6 trillion on COVID in that COVID era. If you look at the balance sheet of the US Fed, you see the spike in 2020, 2021. Same for the European Central Bank. Same for the Bank of England. Britain spent, just a second, spent 410 billion pounds, which the Bank of England is warehousing. Nigeria has been able to step up. We have been able to see growth after COVID, when they said we couldn't see growth. We've been able to outstrip the growth projections of the IMF and the World Bank. Please give us a break. Give Mr. President a break. Absolutely. He has done well, but now let's encourage the state and local government to ensure that this money gets into the pockets of the people. And indeed, and let me say this, the private sector as well, please. The inflation went to 34% because everybody marked up their prices. But I know many private sector companies that are still paying people at the level of 2 years ago. It is unconscionable. And they should understand that the minimum wage is a law, and they must adhere to it. The idea behind minimum wage is actually, and I'll just stop at this. You know, the idea behind minimum wage is not only for the lowest person. There must be consequential adjustment. Apart from the very big people, there must be some adjustment in the salaries, maybe up to assistant manager, deputy manager, and all that. Everybody should earn more in this country because we acknowledge that there's been inflation impacting people, especially on food. Okay, absolutely. Beautiful conversation. Beautiful conversation. Thank you so much, Tokwe Fasua. We've been having this conversation with Tokwe Fasua, the Special Advisor to the President on Economic Affairs, Office of the Vice President. Thank you so much for joining us on Journalist Hangout. All right, BK, your final thoughts on this.
In a day like this, we had so many questions.
Absolutely.
So many.
Absolutely.
Because Tokwe spoke like a teacher. You know, drilling down, ensuring that all the points are well understood.
Exactly.
And that takes time.
Absolutely.
So he wasn't giving one-liners as answers. So we understand. I'm sure it will be back soon.
Yes.
So that some of those questions that we couldn't ask, we can ask.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, then. Thank you so much, Asukwo James. Appreciate you. BKO, thank you so much. Tokwe Fasua, thank you so much for joining us. And that's it on Journalist Hangout today. You can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode tonight at 11. Journalists on Sunday from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. for Journalist Hangout on Sunday. We are on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Benga Oreshegun. Bye for now, and God bless Nigeria.